This meeting is being recorded.
Hey!
Oh, Harry. Hi. Harry Manaka. Wendy. Harry is something else fan.
Randy.
She's with.
Hi, Franklin.
Hello.
And Carrie.
Where's everybody?
Oh, there's B. Hello, B. Oh, there's Amy. There's John.
Karen.
Hi, Franklin. Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been
You're
a
looking
while.
good as always.
Oh, thank you. Hello, Meg.
This is
She
a
must have
real
gotten a-
down home event. So
Yeah.
Cynthia.
hi.
Hi, how do I get the gallery view?
Lina Marie. Oh, click on gallery view.
Upper right corner.
See it.
Good, everybody.
Upper right corner. This looks like a little bunch of boxes. Upper right corner.
This is my iPad. I tried to go on my laptop and it wanted me to install the latest software. And then it asked for my ID and I went, uh-oh. Okay.
Hey Mary, how you doing?
Okay, how are you?
I'm hanging. It's a Sunday. You know how it is.
Yes.
Hi, Mary.
I should be sleeping right now. Hello. I can't see everybody. Oh, hi Russell. How are you?
How are you?
Okay.
Hey Franklin, how's it going?
Okay, good.
This is
All right.
the most fun part of the book launch.
Yeah, I know. So, Franklin, where are you?
Massachusetts.
Oh.
What, to get a big screen?
I can tell if we're on or not. There's Mo.
Hey, people, turn on your cameras. I just see a whole bunch of names.
Hey Mary.
Oh, it's only on one side.
Hey Mo.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
How are you?
Who am I talking to?
Mary.
What are you talking about? Yeah?
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Todd.
Hi.
Good night.
Toss, are you a acupuncturist now?
He's
Yes.
been.
Doctor of Oriental Medicine.
Wow. I understand Dan Promoto is going to you right now.
Oh,
don't know if
yes. Yes, it was a nice reunion.
And he mentioned your name, and I at first didn't recognize it, but now I do. So great.
Hello, Yoshio.
What's that plus sign?
Hi,
Mary.
Eric.
Oh.
Hi Mary.
Hi, Wendy.
How's she
doing? Hi.
Hi, Sherry.
What?
Oh, I know.
Hello, May.
Hi, everybody. I don't
Mo.
know what I'm
Hi,
doing,
Mo.
so
Oh, hi, Art.
don't mind me.
Okay. How are you?
Mary, does
Hey,
John
brother.
still have his Volvo?
No, we finally sold it to the guy across the street. Where are you, Cindy? Got your camera
I'm
on?
here. You see me?
Well, you know, I can only see so much.
Okay, if somebody might have two machines going or two
think
devices
that's
going in
John.
the same room. Yeah.
John, was that you?
It was me, Mary. Kenwood came in. He couldn't find gallery.
All right.
Can't find gallery, but that's
No,
okay.
Okay.
it doesn't exist.
Sandy.
When
You can't.
This is gonna stay
when
forever.
the slides are up,
Hi,
you will
Cindy.
not be able to.
Hi.
Hello, Bo. Hello.
Okay, I think we're gonna. This is great. What a wonderful reunion. I think we're gonna get started, right, Mary? Do you want to get started?
Yeah,
Shall we get-
that's right. This is fun, though.
It is fun. You know, it's like a real event. You know, it's when everybody's coming into the room and we all want to say hi and hopefully we scheduled this for 2 hours so we could have more of that back and forth and reunioning and sharing a little later in the program after the presentations, after we all get to see the slideshow and hear from our speakers today. But we had we have over 160 people on this meeting. It's not a webinar; it's a Zoom meeting, so everybody could be heard if you're unmuted. Let's go ahead, and so we want to just ask everyone to maybe mute your Zoom for now, and then we'll get going on the program. I'm Karen Umemoto, and I'm the Helen and Morgan Chu Chair and Director of the Asian American Studies Center at UCLA. And I'm really happy that you can all join us today, and I hope that you're all doing the best as possible during these trying times. I'd like to start, as we usually do at UCLA, by acknowledging that as a land-grant institution, we recognize the Tongva peoples as the traditional caretakers of Tovangar, which includes the LA Basin and South Channel Islands, and the land upon which UCLA sits. And we're all grateful to live with indigenous peoples of this place and strive to be better caretakers of this land for all who live here. As we begin, I want to recognize our co-sponsors, and it's grown to be quite a list, and we really appreciate each and every one of these organizations. The Gardena Valley Japanese Cultural Institute, JCI, Yellow Brotherhood, Matsubayashi Shorin Ryu Karate of Little Tokyo, East Wind Books of Berkeley, Hirano Acupuncture Clinic, Great Leap, Sansei Music, Asian American Drug Abuse Program, the Little Tokyo Historical Society, Chinatown Community for Equitable Development, UC Santa Cruz Asian Pacific Islander Faculty Group, Asians for Jericho / Mumia, Van Troy Anti-Imperialist Youth Brigade, for those of you who may not know, they're still around, Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress, Nikkei Progressives, National Asian Pacific Islander Mental Health Association, the Japanese American Resource Center of Colorado, the Nikkei Jinkai of Colorado, and the Mile High chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League. So thank you all for co-sponsoring this program and joining us today. The UCLA Asian American Studies Center, we hit our milestone 50th anniversary last year when we looked back to the founding of the Asian American Studies Center, when Mary, Sandy, Vivian, all of whom you'll hear from today, and scores of other students fought for ethnic studies and affirmative action for a more relevant and accessible education for all. We are forever grateful for their dedication and conviction, as we would not be here today otherwise. Mary's book, with contributions from a number of people involved at that time, is a rare pictorial chronicle of the West Coast Asian American movement that not only established Asian American studies, but fought for so much more. What's most unique about the book is the intimacy of the moments Mary captured with her SLR camera, as you will see this afternoon. For some of you, these images will surely bring back a flood of memories, hopefully with fondness, and for others, you'll have a chance to see and hear stories and the wisdom of those who traveled a path that opened up opportunities for the rest of us. I'd like to just share a few words from the closing of the foreword from the book that Mary had asked me to write, and this was before the pandemic. I have noticed a renewed interest in the radical movements of the 1960s among young students and activists. They share frustration at the lack of action to save our planet from global warming. They are troubled by the spread of homelessness alongside the rising ranks of billionaires. Some live under the threat of deportation, while some have no place to live. Like many of my colleagues, I can sense a palpable thirst to understand how best to make the changes needed to improve human life and the life of the planet. While Mary Uyematsu Kao points out that this book is not intended as a call to action, we hope the words and images that she has curated in this collection gives life and light to movements and efforts that continue rockin' the boat. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor Valerie Matsumoto, who will serve as our moderator today. Valerie Matsumoto is the George N. Sakaya Aratani Chair on the Japanese American Incarceration, Redress, and Community. She's also a professor in the Departments of History and Asian American Studies. Thank you for moderating today, Valerie.
Thank you, Karen. A few housekeeping details before we begin. We will be recording the session and it may be shared at a later time. So if you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your cameras. Mics are turned off for everyone except the speakers. We ask that everyone please stay muted, especially during the main program, to respect the speakers as well as to allow everyone to hear the speakers. Feel free to use the reactions button to respond to the speakers or to raise your water, tea, glass, or etc. to cheer in appreciation. Questions may be submitted at any time during the webinar via the chat tab for those on Zoom, located at the bottom of the screen on most computers. For questions or comments directed to a specific speaker, please put their name before the question. I will call on people to share their questions during the discussion section. Questions will be read out loud so webinar attendees may hear them. And the speakers panel section will be for about 1 hour. After the panel discussion, there will be a question and answer period. This is a very rich program. There may be more questions than we can entertain. So we encourage you to buy the book and see our website for a recording of the program that will be posted. Mary Uyematsu Kao, author of Rockin the Boat, is a longtime UCLA Bruin. She got her BA at UCLA in 1971 and earned an MA degree in Asian American Studies in 2007. Her contributions began early when she wrote and created art for Ghidra, an Asian American movement newspaper. Serving as the publications coordinator of the UCLA Asian American Studies Center Press for 30 years, she has had tremendous influence. Everyone who has read Amerasia Journal and the journal AAPI Nexus, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Policy, Practice, and Community, has seen Mary's work. Among the many center publications for which she has created graphic design, I will mention 3. Asian Americans, The Movement and the Moment, 2001. Passing It On, a memoir by Yuri Kochiyama in 2004. And in 2017, Many Bridges, One River, Organizing for Justice in Vietnamese American Communities. In addition, Mary co-edited a 2009 special issue of Amerasia Journal, Where Women Tell Stories. She regularly contributes insightful essays to the Rafu Shinpo newspaper, bringing keen analysis, candor, and passion to challenging issues facing the Japanese American community. Sandy Maeshiro was born in Honolulu and raised in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles, where her parents ran a hot dog stand. Her political awareness began as a student at UC Santa Barbara. In 1970, she returned to LA and started working in the Japanese American Community Services Office, and then joined the Venceremos Brigade to work and learn in Cuba. Upon returning, she completed her BA degree and worked at the Asian Women's Center in LA, a hub for many women's movement activities. She also worked with The Storefront, a multiracial community group in the Jefferson Crenshaw area. After 10 years of teaching, Sandy became a school counselor and later a marriage family therapist. She retired from LAUSD in 2009 and currently serves as a mental health consultant for PACE Head Start and as a parenting instructor at the Asian American Drug Abuse Program. Sandy also helps care for her beautiful grandkids along with her husband, Kenwood Jung. Sandy's early article on the exploitation of Japanese waitresses at a SoCal restaurant is a staple reading in my Asian American Foodways class, always prompting students to discuss their own experiences as wait staff. Vivian Matsushige. Born in the Heart Mountain, Wyoming concentration camp, she spent her early years in Cleveland, Ohio, until her family returned to East Hollywood in 1950. She grew up in the Hollywood Japanese American community known as J-Flats. Vivian got her BA degree at UCLA and worked at the fledgling Asian American Studies Center from 1970 to 74. During an era she described as dramatic, painful, and exciting, she became involved in the Asian American movement, writing articles for Ghidra, working with Amerasia Bookstore, and joining an anti-war protest. After receiving her master's degree in social welfare at UCLA, she began a 35-year career as a licensed clinical social worker, serving at the LA County Department of Mental Health, at Kaiser Permanente, and Pacific Clinics. Since retiring, she has become active with the Evergreen Baptist Church of LA, as well as the Progressive Asian Network for Action, supporting Bernie Sanders' campaigns. Vivian's activism connects issues across time. This includes organizing Day of Remembrance programs about the wartime incarceration of Japanese Americans and supporting undocumented immigrants in detention now. And to start off the program, Mary has created a wonderful slideshow of photos with music to share with us.
Don't make you feel like doing it. Be able to get about 350 or 400 part harmony in this if we tried hard enough. So come on with us. Must be something we can do. Must be something we can do. Say keep on moving. Say keep on moving forward. When I know what the truth is, I tell you something. I tell you something you can. Say keep on moving. Say keep on moving for what's true. Yeah, 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 yeah. Very much. Must be something we can do.
Okay, it's my turn. So just a little bit on the slideshow itself. I did it to show students in a class that I teach every so often on the Asian American movement at UCLA. And so that slideshow is about 11 years old. And you're probably wondering, well, why didn't I use Chris and Joanne, any of their songs for the music background? But one was Gil Scott-Heron, and to pay tribute to the Black Power movement, which really gave inspiration to our movement. And also the particular song, Must Be Something We Can Do. I just felt like it really fit, what we were going through at the time. So, this book has been 50 years in the making, from the 1970s when I was a UCLA art and film student to now, retired and 71 years old and probably a little bit beat up. This book was the first project of my retirement. My original aim in taking these photos was to document Asian American women transforming themselves as they were getting involved in the movement. The Asian American movement changed our lives and the lives of many others who were to benefit from the social change that we fought for. This visual journey to back in the day is meant to share the feelings and struggles we were confronting in creating a new Asian Pacific America. The book is structured in chronological order. Chapters are based on events or organizations that occurred in the movement. Included is this cross-country trip visiting the Asian movement in Denver, Chicago, and New York City. 50 years later, I hope to reconnect all of us who were touched by the power of the movement. Folks coming together and uniting under common banners and seeing changes happen because of our efforts. We learned so much about the U.S. government and how U.S. imperialism is driven to dominate and control global politics for the benefit of the 1%. I present some of the living experience of the 1970s Asian movement with stories from some of the participants. And we're just scrolling through some of the pages of the book. Barbara, you're going to have to probably go faster because it got started late. Okay, so I would like to thank my contributors to this book. We have Sherry Hirota, who we just saw, Asian Health Services in Oakland, Chinatown. She's now head of this humongous health group. Nobuko Uyematsu of Great Leap, who was known back then as Joanne, and it was Chris and Joanne and Charlie Chin, who were basically our troubadours for the movement at the time. Ken Wen-jun, he gives us a picture of the UCLA High Potential Program. Elsie Osajima, my mother, who wrote about, at 94 years old, she wrote about the Nisei Women's Panel that she organized back in the early 70s. Vivian Matsushige, who you'll be hearing from today. Vivian was actually my supervisor when I was a work-study student at the center, although she doesn't remember. Scott Nagatani, Sansei Music, and also he's our main representative of the Van Troy Anti-Imperialist Youth Brigade. We have another member here today too, Pam Iguchi. Mia Iwataki, who I think everybody probably knows. She was like the one of the main people at the JAC's office, which was the center of the LA movement. Sandy Maeshiro, who you will be hearing from today, who's also my neighbor and longtime friend. Marlene Murakami, I also have an interview with her in the book. She just finished 38 years of working at the Japanese American Community and Cultural Center. We're presently, well, I won't get into that. Okay, Lillian Tomoria, who was part of the anti-Marcos campaign. Elaine Takahashi, she really should write a book herself, but she really contributed a lot in terms of the Denver and Boulder, Colorado people, the early days of the Asian movement before she moved here to LA. And I also want to thank March Taniwaki, who helped get a lot of the Colorado co-sponsors for today. Rex Takahashi, who wrote about Chicago. James Okazaki, who was actually interning in Washington, D.C. at the time, and so he was one of the stops we made on the cross-country trip. Misono Iwata Miller, who was my cousin, and she grew up in Seabrook, New Jersey, and so we also stopped there before going to New York City. Tomiya Arai, who's been a longtime artist, we interviewed her as a basement workshop artist back then on our trip, and she's now active with the Chinatown Art Brigade. Wendy Nagatani, who gives us a woman's view of being in the Yellow Brotherhood, since people always think of Yellow Brotherhood as all brothers. I got my t-shirt on. Harvey and B. Dong of Eastwind Books of Berkeley, and also to my living epilogues, Malcolm and Valerie Gao, who were nice enough to humor me, and they both wrote something for the book. They're in the epilogue, and they wrote about what it was like being raised by activist parents. Okay, there's also many others who were quoted from Ghidra articles that I would like to thank. Thank you also to the UCLA Asian American Studies Center, Karen Umemoto, Meg Thornton, Barbara Ramos, Tam Nguyen, and Irene Soriano, and also the Gardena Valley Japanese Cultural Institute, Allison Kochiyama, and Stephanie Mayetta for hosting today's book launch. Also to the UCLA Aratani Care Award Program for funding the printing of this book, and also the UCLA Institute of American Cultures for an award to digitize over 300 negatives. So I will just read a little piece of the epilogue, which has my favorite quote from Malcolm X. Looking back at history shows us who's been doing what to us, for how long, and in how many different ways that we get cajoled. Best said in Malcolm X's famous rant, I say, and I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok. Which I think is a pretty good description of what we're seeing today. Today, as we witness American society appearing to come apart at the seams, my intention for this book is to show how today's progressive movements are a continuum of the 70s movements. The Black Lives Matter movement, the movements for immigrant rights, anti-gentrification struggles, and so many other struggles going on today. All have one thing in common with the 70s movements. The 1% class of U.S. imperialists who have a stranglehold on American democracy, our economy, our health and welfare, and even our virtual being. Working people need to take ownership of the government so our tax dollars can serve the needs of the many and stop bailing out the 1%. Amen. Valerie, turn your mic on.
I was just saying amen, Mary. Thank you very much for your terrific slideshow and book talk. So now we will turn to our panel. Vivian.
Hello, Valerie, and hello, everybody.
What did you experience growing up that may have influenced you getting involved in the Asian American movement? Was there a particular incident that led you to join the movement?
Well, I think starting from being born in camp sort of framed my entire trajectory. My parents experiencing discrimination in their friends, in spite of the fact that they went to college, they weren't able to get hired and started their own businesses. And to always be growing up in J Flats, for example, I really felt very protected by an all Japanese American community and everyone living very close by. Dayton Heights was a center, and then we had church in back, Christ Presbyterian, and then the Hollywood Japanese Community Center. And everybody, most of the kids went to Japanese school. I didn't. And then going to a very diverse high school, which is Belmont High School, all of that really types of peoples from different parts of the world. And so when I went to UCLA, it was a big culture shock. At that time, people were saying that it was called JCI because Jews could not get into USC at the time. So they all went to UCLA and raised the grade point average, which the rest of us suffered from. And so all of these experiences, one by one, really formed the way I looked at the world as being sort of marginalized and needing to be protected. But then when you go out into the big world, what happens? So then when I went to UCLA, that was a surprise that I even survived because kids from my school ended up dropping out because it was so difficult, such a culture shock. And then when I graduated, I wanted to travel, so I worked for Pan American World Airways, which is a huge company. And I got involved in a struggle there where we had no union, and the Brotherhood of Railway Union, the employees of Pan Am were striking against their union and wanting the Teamsters to take over. So we had no union representation during that time. So the way we were treated as employees was a really tremendous shock, a great pressure to sell, and was not really a very warm, friendly environment. In fact, people were grinding their teeth at their desks and having to take rests. And then during that time, which is after I graduated UCLA in 1967 to 1968, I heard about Colin Watanabe, who was a student with me as an undergraduate, but he was so incredibly shy. And I hear that he was in an organization called Oriental Concern, and he was making speeches to different groups and organizations. And that was really surprising to me. So I wanted to see what was going on, and that's when I started going to meetings chaired by Oriental Concern. And from there, my curiosity and involvement gradually took off, and I quit Pan Am. Didn't like being treated like a commodity, so that's how it began for me.
Thank you. Sandy, in your interview in the book, you talk about going to Cuba on the Venceremos Brigade. Please tell us about the brigade and your trip and what you learned about Cuba as a socialist country.
Okay, hello everyone. I wish I could see everybody. So the Venceremos Brigade began in 1969 as a way to break the trade, travel, and information embargo against Cuba. The U.S. had imposed a strict blockade against the Cuban people after oil refineries were nationalized. It was a way to cut off trade and other relations between the U.S. and Cuba. And it continues today. It's like the longest standing embargo in the world. So the Venceremos provided a way for North Americans to come to Cuba to learn firsthand what the revolution was about, through physical work, cultural exchanges, and dialogue. The first two brigades worked on sugarcane production and were primarily composed of white radicals. So by the time the third brigade was beginning to form in the summer of 1970, the Cubans requested that the makeup be more reflective of the movements in the U.S., primarily black and brown and yellow movements. So the third brigade had a high number of third-world people from all parts of the country and varying levels of political understanding. In preparation for the brigade, each local area held study sessions to learn more about the history of Cuba and the revolution. So we went to the Isle of Youth, which is a small island off the main island of Cuba, and we worked in citrus production, which was just beginning as Cuba was trying to expand its economy from just being a one-crop economy of sugar. The work was hard, and many of us did physical labor for the first time in our lives. We had to get up early in the morning and work in the hot sun. And through this process, we learned about setting goals, teamwork, and building a new society. And at every break, our jefe, or a team leader, talked to us about lessons he learned fighting for the revolution and how it changed his life. After working for 6 weeks, we toured the island for 2 weeks. So can you imagine 10 huge buses filled with North Americans of every hue and background going through the small streets of Cuba, small streets of Cuban towns and cities. We even marched up to Che's headquarters in the Sierra Maestra. And we realized that for many of the Cubans, this was the first time that they had seen North Americans. One of the highlights of my experience there was being able to break away from the brigade people because I was able to speak Spanish and I had an afternoon free where I could explore the sights and sounds of Havana. So I walked for what seemed like hours, looking at bookstores, going through parks, viewing public art, and observing everyday Cubans going about their daily lives. It was fascinating, and I stopped and talked with the always anxious to have a conversation Cubano. Cubans have the highest literacy rate in Latin America, and their level of political discourse is amazing. They can talk about any topic, any subject, just about anything. In 2001, I returned to Cuba with my husband and 2 adult children as part of the NCRR delegation to meet and learn about the Cuban-Japanese experience and to celebrate it one. Many changes had occurred in that time, most notably the departure of the Soviet Union and the special period. Through these hardships, the Cuban spirit and ingenuity prevailed. They exemplified the belief that when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Their society had grown and developed into a beacon for the rest of Latin America and the world. The resilience and pride of the Cuban people was impressive and inspiring. One quick memory is we went to a local CDR, which is a committee to defend the revolution. It's like these local units and communities. And they wanted to explain to us the process of local elections. And the leaders of the CDR were housewives, and they came running in, taking off their aprons to explain to us about the electoral process. And then they discussed whether or not the turnout was 95 or 97%. We also went to a community clinic where people were treated for diabetes, high blood pressure, and other pre-existing conditions, but they were treated with alternative medicines such as sitting in a magnetic chair for hours or acupuncture. The various government and party officials I encountered 50 years ago and 20 years ago were always quick to say that Cuba was not perfect. That while racism, sexism, class differences, and other societal ills continued, the difference was that the government was dedicated to eradicating all of these ills in society consciously. They're in their constitution. One of the biggest changes in Cuba has been the recognition of LGBTQ rights, and they now have an institute in Cuba to study those issues. So the trip for me was eye-opening, was life-changing, and it made me realize that there are societies in the world that are dedicated to the welfare of the whole, and that in this society where individualism is glorified, there are alternatives to the way people can live.
Thank you very much. Back to Vivian. Vivian, in your interview, you talk about how the movement has influenced a whole generation. What does that influence look like? What are the results of that influence?
Many of the people that we see in the book, friends of mine still, hopefully, are still working very hard and trying to live out their beliefs and commitment to human rights. What is really remarkable to me is when Mary asked me to participate in this, she was looking at women who were not necessarily at the forefront or the stars of the movement, so to speak, but those who may have been in the background and contributing what they could. So that's me. And when I look back, I'm just really remarked at what people are doing. I mean, let's start with graduates of the UCLA Asian American Studies program, people like Stuart Crow, for example, who went to law school, who was at the study center, went to law school. As soon as he graduated, he started the Asian Law Caucus, worked with that, and turned it into the Asian Legal Center, and now Asian Americans for Advancing Justice, which has multiple offices in Chicago and Washington. And that's and he's still hasn't quit yet. Apparently, I just noticed that he's been appointed interim director of ethnic studies at Cal State. And so I really admire these folks who are obviously reaching out to so many people, and that so many people are carrying on their struggles. Then, of course, there are other organizations like the Study Center itself, celebrating its 50 years anniversary, and also continuing to guide and influence all students to look at the human dignity of other cultures. And so I see so much of this, just to mention, in fact, Judy Chu, obviously running for office and exerting a great deal of influence in Washington, and still being a part of the Progressive Caucus. And May Chen, who graduated from Radcliffe, who went on to become a labor organizer and one of the founders of the Asian Pacific Labor Alliance. And so many other institutions. Asian American Drug Abuse started out with hardcore and has had several, starting with Tommy Chung, and then Ron Wakabayashi was a director, then Patrick, I forget Patrick's last name at the moment, and then now Mike Watanabe, and how long they've been working and helping people who have problems with drug abuse. So it's inspiring to me just to watch my contemporaries continue on their struggle like with Nikkei Progressives, and so on. So we are looking towards the next generation to take over, just as we took over from the previous generation, previous generation, and asked them to move over. I'm looking forward to somebody say to me, move over and let them take the lead. So it's really quite encouraging and inspiring.
Thank you very much. Sandy, there is so much captured in this book. Public events, private celebrations, and a great deal of behind-the-scenes work, much of it done by women. Please tell us about a section of the book that particularly struck you or brought back memories. Sandy's having technical difficulties, possibly. Move to perhaps until Sandy comes back?
She's reconnecting.
Okay. All right, great. So even on Zoom, one can have the real technological issues that we have. Oh, there's Sandy. Excellent.
Here I am. Sorry, the computer restarted. So, did you ask the question already, Valerie?
I did.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
You want me to repeat it? Or are you okay?
No, I have the question here. Thank you. Great. So, I think the thing about Mary's book is that it shows everyday people doing everyday things in the movement, everyday activities. So whether they were Serve the People programs, celebrations, pilgrimages, and trips to places near and far, working together to protest the Vietnam War, injustices in the community and the world, Mary captured all of this, and she brings to life the breadth and diversity of the Asian American movement. People fought and worked on many fronts. Yellow Brotherhood was addressing the drug epidemic that hit the Japanese American community in the 1960s and 70s. People were involved in making pilgrimages to Manzanar to learn about the forced incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. The Asian Women's Center in Deidre addressed issues around race, gender, and class. The Van Troy Anti-Imperialist Brigade protested the Vietnam War and Japanese imperialism. Asian American organizations in LA, Oakland, San Francisco, Boulder, Chicago, all fighting for bettering conditions in Chinatowns and other Asian American communities. All of this and more is included in the book. And as you saw in the slide presentation, you had a sense and a feeling of what it was like. So for those young people who wondered, what was it like back in the day? Rockin the Boat gives you a visual sweep of that era, and you feel as though you're in the middle of the struggle, united with others. We were no longer the silent model minority. We were taking our place on the stage of history, along with Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other freedom fighters.
Did you get cut off, or you?
No, I'm done.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Vivian, how did the Asian American movement influence your life course and thinking?
I think that there's part of this is what you bring, your nature, and then nurture. And I think that the Asian movement was a nurturing part that really pushed and supported me, or all women, to expand and reach out into areas that they were not necessarily comfortable at. And so what happened was, I think I retreated, and my own personal history is a little bit contradictory, because I retreated into my profession and I think worked through one-to-one with people that I was counseling as a way of making change. Then after I retired, I was relieved to get back into working more actively in the community. And I know, I hope that Mike Rossi is still here watching. But I said at some point, my gosh, you all have been working so hard, you're still here. And I said, where have I been? And he said, yeah, where have you been? And I think that's part of how people have to regulate how much they participate and then how active to become. Now that I'm retired, I have much more time, but also I'm not married and I don't have children. So I'm able to focus more on, now my community is my family, and so I need to reactivate there, and that's why I am more returning to more community activities or struggles.
Well, those are that's very helpful to think about the meanings of the movement and how, in a sense, it was a community and it continues as a community. I think that you've also made us think about how hard it can be to strike a balance in one's life. So let us move to back to Mary and Vivian also. How did your Asian American movement experiences affect the things that you've gotten involved with in your retirement?
Okay. Well, in a lot of ways, I feel like I never really left the movement because I worked 30 years at Asian American Studies Center at UCLA. And so, you're kind of in this whole Asian American thing all that time. I did start writing articles for the Rafu Shimbo, and so that's kind of brought me closer to some of the different community struggles that are going on. I haven't really gotten actively involved, but enough to be able to write about them. And what we're seeing in like the Japanese American community today is a lot of the institutions that were created by the Asian American movement. Institutions like Japanese American National Museum, the Japanese American Community and Cultural Center. They're all facing problems with financial stability and I guess like readjusting to who their community base is because that's been going through a lot of transition. And so in those struggles,
And what?
Well,
Here.
In that situation, a lot of problems arise. And so those are some of the kind of issues that I've been trying to tackle with some of my Rafu articles. I guess a really sharp example is Cato. The Cato board sold their facilities, and so the elder care facilities for Japanese Americans and Japanese who don't speak English have been sold, right? And it was sold to a real estate company, Pacifica, and so now they want to transition those into basically condominiums. Mm-hmm. So this is where gentrification is really hurting communities. And so these are some of the things that you could say the Asian American movement influenced me to take this path.
Thank you. And Vivian, did you want to respond to this?
One of the problems I'm having with is memory lapses and brain freeze. So, Valerie, can you repeat the question?
Of course. Sorry about that. How did your Asian American movement experience affect the things you've gotten involved with in your retirement? And I know you've gotten involved with quite a lot.
Yeah, I think that while at school, even in school and social welfare, I became more acutely aware of the difference between race, class, and gender identification. Even now, I think people are discussing, should we become, or individually talking to ourselves about, should I become involved in the Asian American community? Should I get involved in the larger community? Is this about racism, or is this about social class? It's this constant dialogue that makes me flip-flop from organization to organization. As I was telling the group earlier, one of the things I found out about, after I had my accident in 2003, and for those of you who don't know, yeah, I'm in a wheelchair after a skiing accident. So, let's see, what was my point? There was a time I sought leadership from, people who are active in the community, and I think this time David Moncava was very influential in getting me involved in the Day of Remembrance, and also with the Bernie Sanders campaign. We reconnected there, which is more about social class than race. And yet, with the UK Progressives, which I sort of marginally had joined, I've been working on issues having to do with class and Black Lives Matter. I guess the thing is, I want to get involved in many things, but I think that the best thing for anyone is to just focus on something small, and no matter, like Mary said, no matter how small your contribution, I think it adds up. It's all very important, and even just voting is important as well. That one thing that I realize is there always a push and pull between wanting to make it also in the mainstream society and then bumping up against the glass ceiling wherever you are. So it's partially to define who you are and do what you can do within the context that you find yourself.
Thank you. Much food for thought. So I would like to now pose this question to all three of our panelists, and that is, what is the main lesson you have learned from your experiences that you would like to pass on? And perhaps Sandy will start us off.
Sorry about all these glitches. So first of all, I would like to thank Mary, Valerie, the staff at the Asian Studies Center for allowing me to participate in this panel. It's quite an honor, and to be here with so many of you who have made and continue to make so many contributions to the Asian American movement. So when I look at this question, it's really hard because there's so many lessons. I think it's important to put the Asian American movement in the context of what came before. And Mary alluded to that in the beginning when she talked about the Black Power movement and also the worldwide revolutionary movement that was going on at the time. And we have our elders, people like Malcolm X, Yuri Kochiyama, Kazumi Jima, and so many, many others who laid and gave us a path to begin to follow. So one lesson I learned is to look at our struggles as a process. We move forward, we have victories, large and small, and then sometimes we have to retreat. And another huge lesson for me personally was, and many times I had to learn this lesson the hard way, is that not to burn bridges, to always keep an open mind and to continue to look forward. Our goal, or one of our missions, I think, today, in light of what is going on with such threats to our democracy, is to build a united front against fascism. And that means that we welcome all those who fight injustice. And there's injustice that we've seen everywhere. We had huge aspirations. We were going to be the generation to change the world, and all for the better. And I think it's easy to get cynical because we didn't meet all of our goals. But I think we had an opportunity to make a difference, and I think we did. The young people today fighting on all of the important issues that have been mentioned, Black Lives Matter, the people in detention centers, immigration, gentrification, the housing crisis, and on. It's all coming to light. And to the young people today, I feel it's your turn now. We as elders are here to support and advance your causes. And I think, I'm just going to end with this, that the refrain continues to remain, power to the people.
Vivian, would you like to, we'll give Mary the last word. Vivian, would you like to chime in now?
Well, actually, Sandy said it very well. I think in looking back, I'm a little bit older than most of even my contemporaries. I'll be turning 74 I mean, I am 70, well, sorry, 75, and you know, my brain freezes, as I said. But I looking back, there are times when, you know, there was a lot of frustration and questioning of why am I doing this? Is it really worth it? And I think that it's something that is either in you or not in you, and that I think that the easiest way to go forward is to simply go through the doors that are open for you. And when people ask you for help, then you give it, and that's all you can do. And just be aware of who you are and what values you hold, and to realize that there's nothing else you can do but keep on fighting, even though it seems like the fight is very slow and there are few rewards. But I think the camaraderie and the friendships that you gain are really, really the greatest reward.
Great. Mary?
Okay. I think the two most important things that I would like to pass on. The first one is critical thinking, learning how to think out of the box, being able to see through the propaganda, what are the fake stories, what's the real story. And that's becoming even more important today because we're bombarded with so many different news sources. So critical thinking, I think, is really essential in terms of taking on the struggles today. Also, as far as thinking out of the box, it's like, how do we go beyond fighting the same struggles over and over again, you know, which is what we're going through today. The second thing, which is probably the hardest thing, is that we always need to look for things that we have in common with other people, especially if they have different politics than us. The polarization and divide is getting so, it's getting violent. You know, for us to be able to cut through that, I think is really important. And so that's, you know, we do have commonalities with the white supremacists. What are they, right? They're not part of the 1%. You know, they're very misguided people, but, you know, I'm not saying, you know, we're going to go confront them, but, you know, my point is that, you know, we've got to try and find those commonalities with the 99%. And that's it. Power to the people.
Our panelists have been exemplary in their speed. This is a record for any panel I have ever been on. So I want, before we move on, I want to actually give the panelists a chance. If there was a question that you wanted to respond to that you did not have a chance to, we do have some time. You know, I don't know if Mary wanted to say a little bit more about her book or anything that particularly, you know, raised memories, but this is your chance because we do have a little bit of time.
Okay. It's towards the end of the book, but there was not a lot of attention given to the Confucius Plaza struggle in New York City. And it's one that I'm particularly proud of. I think because, for whatever reason, the organization that led the struggle moved on and became the Communist Workers' Party. And then there was the killing of 5 Communist Workers' Party members in Greensboro back in 1979. The Confucius Plaza struggle really did get the play that I felt it should have. You know, it was a very groundbreaking struggle in New York where they fought for and they won construction jobs for Chinese construction workers. It's here they're building this high-rise building in Chinatown. It was part of the redevelopment of Chinatown in New York City in the 70s. So Chinese workers were trying to apply for jobs there, and they were getting nowhere. And so this organization was created called the Asian Americans for Equal Employment, also known as AFE. And it was a great struggle. You know, the AFI workers were working with Black and Puerto Rican construction workers who have been historically been kept out of the construction industry in New York. And so they actually taught AFI workers how to go and shut a construction site down, which was the only way they were able to really get their demands heard and start breaking in and getting jobs. So that's probably one of the chapters I'm particularly proud of.
Thank you. Whetting people's interest, I hope, in buying the book. So, thank you very, very much for your thoughts, your experience, your insight. I think, I don't know, but I'm sure there have been some questions from the audience or comments. Okay, perhaps we have one question. Surely, I'm surprised. I'm shocked with knowing who's in the audience that nobody has any comments or questions. This is really amazing. So
there's a lot of chats.
Okay, I don't actually see the question. Tom, could you? Oh, here I see. Oh, okay, I see a question. There was a question from. Anyway, let's maybe shift, and we can do a shift to the question and answers comment section with our panelists. Question from Abraham Ferrer. And Abe, are you there?
Last time I checked.
Great. Would you read your question for the panelists?
Oh, you want me to read my question? Okay. Yeah. Okay, I had addressed a question to Mary, and in deference to Valerie, I will read it. Hey, Mary, this question may be a little, quote-unquote, inside baseball, but looking at your photos so many years later, did you realize right away that you were documenting key points in the Asian American movement, or did those realizations come to you much later as time gave importance to what you were documenting? And I think this is because, because I come from an organization that has like a very strong still photographic practice. Shut up. So
communications.
We document everything in real time. But the importance or significance of a lot of the things that we document, don't really make themselves very known to us until we revisit them years later. You know what I'm saying? So I get that a lot of times. Like I will go out on photo assignments. I will do my own thing, but the importance of what we shoot, don't really hit us on the head until years and years later. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of like thought I asked you that question because you were similarly in it as well. But then, here you are, revisiting a lot of these images like 40, 50 years later. So I thought that was a question to ask.
Yeah, there was no overall plan in terms of what I was documenting. I was basically just very spontaneously, as an artist, we are spontaneous, right? I would hear about an event, so I would just go, right? And so I really had no idea. And actually, for any historians of the movement, if they looked at the book, they would probably wonder, why is this important? What is so important about this? So you see a lot of events which, they were maybe run-of-the-mill movement events. They may not have been real milestone, events, but that's what I had. Yeah. And so that's pretty much what I gave is what I had. And as far as their historical importance, I think, it's marking what our politics was at the time. Mm-hmm. That's about the best I can say, and I guess going back and trying to see what the importance was. So that's where I went back to a lot of Gidra articles and, did more homework on those events if they were written about. Mm-hmm. And I know the problem that visual communications is facing is you've got this huge archive. You probably got the best photos of the Asian American movement.
Yeah,
but they're identified.
Yeah, but I would just tell you that one of the things that I really appreciate about you coming out with this book is that I come from an organization and a movement that for many, many years, whether or not it gets fair enough to say, but it has been stigmatized because while visual communications was in its formative years, except for a very, very few very notable people in that organization, basically it was an all-boys club, right? So the documentation that was happening at Visual Communications was really excellent stuff, and I use it all the time, but it was coming from a male gaze. And I think that just the fact that, you are coming out now with an alternate viewpoint, that we don't see very often, I think is very refreshing.
Thank you.
You're here. Thank you. So I see we also have another question from Rui Wang. Rui Wang, would you like to ask your question? Okay, well, since Rui Wang is not responding yet, I will read the question. And that is, what would you say, and this is to everyone, what would you say is the biggest difference between the progressive movement of the 70s and the movements today?
Vivian, you want to go?
Personally, I'd love to hear from other people, just to hear their comments, because I know that they have a lot to pitch in.
Yeah, maybe I can get a conversation started, but I would just say that comparing what we went through and what's happening today, it's so much more complicated and more complex. I feel like we had it easy in a lot of ways. We're much more focused. There's so many different things going on. I feel like that in itself can, in some ways, defeat us if we don't know how to bring it together.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to add, I think one of the big differences is that, just look at the Asian American community. It's completely changed in the last 50 years. When Vivian, Mary, and I were active, it's primarily Japanese Americans. Now we're the minority, kind of, and the struggles that we fought around, like, the camps, they're very different now. The issues, there's a continuation, yes, of what happened to Japanese Americans and being forcefully moved to camps, and what's happening with, migrants that are coming and being held in detention center. There's a strong link. And that's because the government policy has not changed in terms of how it treats others. But the breadth and scope, like Mary said, of the movement is just so completely different. In the old days, we had to mimeograph things. We had to call each other on the phone. We had to use public phones. Just the whole way that things are communicated now. The young people today during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, within minutes, literally, could mobilize at a corner because of social media, because of the cell phones. So it's a very different world, and the language that's being used, the terminology, all of that is very different. And I think the other thing is that it seemed like in the 70s we were very focused on the word revolution. And we hear that word used today, but I'm not sure everybody is, has the same context for the word. So that's just a thought.
Thank you. So I see that Yen, now we have a bunch of questions. Yen has a question to ask. This is a really great question. I think it's very timely. Yen, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry, which question did I ask? I'm going back.
How do you not burn out?
Yes.
Sorry, I just really want to hear the answer to this question.
Oh, yes. How do you not burn out? Or if you do, what do you do to get back on the horse, I guess?
Maybe I'd like to try to answer that one. I burnt out so many times I can't remember. But lately, when I burn out, I retreat into my Korean dramas, which may have nothing to do with anything, except that they do focus a lot on class differences and how, I think of the chaebol class, and looks down on the working class. So every once in a while you do. But then I also remember that asking that same question to someone in social welfare, and I said, how do you not burn out? My God. I mean, there are times when I would go home crying because I was so, felt so helpless and frustrated. And then he would tell me, oh, well, I've gone through 15 burnouts myself. And I guess what it is that, well, you just retreat a little bit, take care of yourself, and then you will want to come back because it's a part of you. The work that you do for human justice or social justice is so important that you will want to get back to it. And so I wouldn't necessarily push yourself, but I would just relax and maybe just do the next best, easiest thing that you can if you feel that you really need to do something.
Very helpful. Mary and Sandy, if you want to add anything?
Go ahead, Mary. Go ahead.
You know, there's been some talk of younger activists today talking about self-care. And I haven't looked into it, but I would imagine that's out there because of preventing people from burning out. I think the hardest thing to do when you jump into getting involved is that you tend to like immerse yourself because everything's so new and exciting. But that's where you start burning bridges, maybe not purposely, but you leave a lot of things behind. And so it's not easy, but if you can maintain some kind of balance between, you know, what was your life before you got heavily involved and not throwing that away, but being able to start fitting in, you know, this new activist lifestyle without dropping out, you know, where you were before. I've been really good at burning bridges, so I think this book has been my way of trying to come back, build those bridges back.
Okay. Sandy, did you want to add anything?
Go ahead, Valerie, to the next one.
Okay. I see that Dr. Tatsuo Hirano has his hand raised, so would you like to ask your question?
There he is.
There he is.
Turn it.
Okay, unmute. Sorry, technical. I would like to congratulate you and everyone else, but particularly you, Mary, for your amazing accomplishment. It's I would say probably a work in progress. Just you could add more and more and more. For me, the Asian American movement, you know, starts with the Black Panther movement, and also the Asian American Community Services, JACS, Asian involvement. That was like, at that time, the hub of the Asian American movement across the country. And people connected with each other through that office on Weller Street. And everyone met everybody there. And one of the biggest part of that was based off of the Panther program of serve the people, of the 5 basic needs, and studying the Red Book. And a big part of that was self-criticism and criticism. You know, that whenever you deal with differences, you kind of address yourself first. And so that's how things were handled, you know, in terms of differences or differences of ideas and such. But the influence of that time, you know, and largely has to do with the Asian American hardcore, was like the center starting point of it all. Russell Valparaiso, Ray Tasaki, which Mo Nishida would refer to as the chairman. And he referred to him as that because of his vision. You know, this adds to the character, I believe, and there's so much more to add to the story. There is the aspect of the student movement and what was contributed. But just before then, there was that street aspect of the lumpen proletariat, which I am part of. I started very young, and I was lucky because I was able to get hooked up with some amazing people like Mo Nishida, Ray Tasaki, you know, Russell Valparaiso, Shinya Ono, Kathy, Masaoka, and many others who, you know, dedicated their whole life so much that collectives were developed. And, you know, and I must say that the difference between collectives and commune is that collectives were political. Communes were not. We were not a commune. We had developed collectives. But anyway, if any of you on the panel have anything to add to that, I would love to hear it. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
For your question, panelists?
That's another book. There's a lot to add, but thank you. I would agree. I wouldn't know if the JATS was the national hub, but I know it was definitely the LA hub. Maybe you're right. I don't know.
Well, I think in LA, the JATS office, because it was all of these community people and community, you know, doing community work in specific areas, it was in a lot of ways kind of a contrast to the student movement. And so I remember my early days in the JACS office, coming in as an ex-student or as a current student. You know, there was so much that I couldn't learn in school, but there was a lot I could learn in the JACS office about the community, what it's, you know, the whole street people culture and all of that. And the JACS office provided so many people with so many ways to get involved. You know, there was health, there was legal, there was, you know, employment options. There was just so many different ways to get involved at the JACS office that I think that's one of the reasons why it was such a hub. And the vision and the energy was, we were just going to take over. You know, we were not afraid. It just gave us this kind of bold attitude that what we were doing was right. So I think the JACS office, you know, we owe a lot to all of the people that were in the JACS office.
Thank you for that example. I see we now have quite a lot of questions. I see we have a question from Liang Dong. Would you like to raise your question?
Hi. Thank you, panelists. Okay. Let me read my questions. So, what do you think the Asian American communities and the Asian American academia need to do to achieve justice and equity for all Asian Americans? And I have another question. I appreciate Ms. Kao highlighting the important contribution of Asian women in the 70s movement. So what does Asian American feminism mean to you today? And what do you hope the young Asian American feminists to fight for today? Thank you.
Which question do you want to do first?
Which question do you want to do first?
Well, the second one's easier.
Start with the second one. The first one could be another book.
Yeah. Gee, you know, my intention like even starting when I started the master's program in Asian American Studies was not to focus on women, but then I started reading some of the stuff that was coming out from Asian feminists in the 80s and 90s, and they were treating us from the movement, the 70s movement, as victims in our own movement because the male chauvinism was so bad, and I couldn't sit right with that at all. I mean, definitely we face the male chauvinism just like you face it again today, right? It's out there. It's in the real world. But we were just coming into being also as Asian Americans, a new identity, right? As opposed to being Orientals and something to be ashamed of. Now we were proud, we were standing tall. And so that's where this whole concept of what they now call intersectionality, which is, the relationship of race, gender, and sex, all those things that they interplay in you as a person. You don't separate it out yourself like this part is, women and this part is race. It all exists in all of us. And so that's why, we weren't about to join the white feminist movement because there was a lot of racism there, right? And I think we created much better changes in our own community with Asian American men by staying in our community and struggling with them. Otherwise, who's gonna struggle with them on their male chauvinism? I don't see myself as a feminist because I think just from the old movement, we a lot of us still have this thing of, feminism is a white thing, right? Even though it shouldn't be. But, it started carrying a certain connotation with it, which for me, I guess I never got rid of. But at the same time, you could say the book is very focused on women and what we were doing, also to prove that we contributed and probably held up more than half the sky. During the movement days, we were like the nuts and bolts. Putting things together, organizing. So I really don't know how to answer your question as far as Asian feminism today. I feel like what we have created as new women coming out of that movement definitely helped generate, Asian women today, which I feel is very strong. You see a lot of Asian women leadership out there, and so, I don't know if it's a situation where, we need to like make sure that the brothers don't get left behind.
I think we have so many.
I'm sorry.
Very, very briefly, then we'll move on.
Oh, I was just going to say that I was talking with a friend, Lillian Bondo. I think she's listening. But most of the women who are involved, are young persons like yourself, young, are of the 1.5 generation, meaning that you are either recent immigrant, came here when you were very young, or your parents are immigrant. Whereas for myself, I'm third generation Japanese American, and I was just reading about Grace Lee Boggs, who was revolutionary and to us, but your struggle is within the community that you are, and if you're from a recent immigrant community, the man holds so much more power than for our children. I see so many young men really being involved in raising their family 50-50 and are not afraid of strong women. But I would imagine that if you're from a recent immigrant community, the pressures on women or the being confined to certain roles is much more difficult to overcome. And the problem too is we are also very tribal. You know, we were in an Asian American community, but not necessarily the other Chinese American community, the Vietnamese community, the Cambodian community, Korean community, etc. They did not necessarily see themselves as primarily Asian American. They needed to deal with struggles that had directly affected them, their own specific community. And so I would ask you, Liang, are you a member of a group? Because if you're...
Which group are you talking about, Vivian?
Any group of like-minded people who are think like you and are striving for the same things.
Yeah.
So that's where I think you're going to get your strength and how to deal with male chauvinism as it exists for you where you were.
Thank you so much for that wisdom.
And you can get help from other people who have struggled through this before.
Thank you for your question. I think we have a question from Casimiro Tolentino. Would you please ask your question? Cas Tolentino?
I realized I was going to be talking, but anyway, one of the things that I learned was for many of us, you know, the Asian American Studies Center seemed to be the incubator for a lot of the different movements. I know that Vivian mentioned Stewart, and yeah, I mean, I met him because he was in a tutorial project and working at Castelar. But so many more things like VC, where Abe is from. I remember being part of that coordinating committee, and we were talking about approving, you know, buying a camera, buying this, buying a certain kind of lens. And it seemed like Ghidra, all those different movements had some ties to UCLA, specifically UCLA Asian American Studies. And for many of us, we took those classes. And without those classes developing our own consciousness, I don't think we could have moved forward. I guess my question is really, what role do you think that the Asian American Studies Center played?
Is that for me?
Oh, yeah, Mary, go ahead.
Okay, I think, you know, what you say is true, right? That there was a ton of projects that came out of the UCLA Asian American Studies Center, but there was also a lot of stuff going on out in the community. And I know when I would go down to the Jack's office, you know, and they ask who I am, and I say I'm a UCLA student, and it's like, oh, because a lot of UCLA students would go down but not be very committed, and they would, you know, maybe dabble this and that, but, you know, not give their all, right? Which is what a lot of people were doing. They were dropping out of school and giving their all to work in the Jack's office, and, you know, it's like 24/7. That is a burnout, but
so, you know, for Filipino Americans, there was an interesting twist, because the community came to us. Royal Morales, Esther Soriano, I think, and I'm maybe just guessing from their perspective, but we were kind of the folks that were going to move it forward, because I was teaching the class. We started Samahan Filipino. You know, it was through that class or through Samahan that I first met Helen Brown. I mean, they all came, and we chatted with them, and they invited us into the community. And for many of us, that was our means of keeping our ties to the community and growing with it.
You know, I think that happened very, very early on with the center, where people, you know, were coming from the community, asking us to help with this or that. But I think as things developed and there was much more of a youth movement involved, and a lot more street people, that some of those connections, got a little loose. And also differences that, Japanese Americans kind of dominated the movement in Los Angeles at the time. So that would account also for just, we had numbers, right? So you had all these different little groundswells going on.
As Vivian was saying, I think for us as Filipino Americans, I think we needed to take care of our community, our history, our heritage first. I think we did tie in from the APA movement, but it was using the APA movement as a vehicle for moving forward. But I think we started Samahang, and first questions people ask us, why don't you, are you trying to pull away from the APAs? Or even when we went out to the community, we started a Filipino American Art Association, or very focused Filipino programs and organizations. But I think that was one of our first steps in making sure that we weren't forgotten. And you're right, the movement was very Chinese, Japanese centric in many ways.
Right.
And it was tough sometimes to go past that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's important.
Well, I think we have maybe time for just one last question. And I don't know, I see Karen Umemoto had a question. Did you want to ask your question?
Actually, it was more piggybacking on Kaz's. Actually, was thinking about what Kaz was saying. One of the things that I notice now is that a lot of the students who are really active are the South Asian students, the Southeast Asian students, organizing around issues of anti-Muslim, racism, around deportations and immigration. And so a lot, and I also see Filipino students and other students still active as well. But I think it's the ones that are really facing the brunt of what's happening with COVID, with the, with the all the things that are going on, that really have taken an active role. And so I think there are things that are different and then certain things that are the same. Like students trying to juggle things now that they, like they did before, like you did before, but it's a lot harder because you're paying, $30,000 a year, $35,000 a year to go to school, right? And so, parents are getting, laid off of work. And so there's so many challenges now. But my question was more about how the diversification of the AAPI, right, Asian American Pacific Islander population, especially with more Pacific Islanders and Southeast Asians and others, playing more of an active role, and also taking the brunt of a lot of the growing disparities. What does that mean for the Asian American movement today? Looking back on what you had experienced.
I would like to say something about that. I know with the organization Progressive Asian Network for Action, we do a lot of networking for other groups, and many of them ethnic or geographic, where there are problems in the community. We have tried to network with them, and even the broader community, the Sunrise movement, to support them and everything that they do. One of the things that, to go back to what Liana said, is that we try to support all different types of groups. If you're in a small little group and you're doing something, you can reach out to any of the people that Karen can network for you And and also, I want to digress a little bit and give a shout out to Long Beach State, because they contributed massively with the curriculum and so forth. And their students also were very much a part of the movement. And I think it tended to, of course, most of us are from UCLA, so we tend to be UCLA centric. But there are so many other college campuses that were involved, and they need to be given credit. And the thing about the student movement was that it wanted to make the campus relevant to the community. So when Todd says about hardcore needed to bring to the campus, you're not serving our people, our group. So you need to, and that needs to be part of the dialogue.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have so many fabulous questions now. This is very frustrating, so I have to apologize to those of you. Questions will not be immediately given to the panel, but we will save the chat. There's one person who said that she would really like to, or he or she would like to be in touch with other attendees. So if you are interested in networking, as this person has suggested, perhaps you could put that in the chat, and maybe we can create an email for those people. I hope that, Karen, nod if that's viable. Is that a viable thing to do? Okay, great. All right, so if you are interested in doing that, please put yourself in the chat and indicate that you would like to be in touch with other attendees. And and clearly there's interest in the conversation. And so now, again, thank you to our panelists for their taking questions. Before closing, I would like to introduce Stephanie Maeda of the Gardena Valley Japanese Cultural Institute to share their upcoming programs.
Thank you, Valerie. On behalf of the Gardena Valley Japanese Cultural Institute, I just want to thank and congratulate Mary on the release of her book, and also the UCLA Asian American Studies Center for organizing this excellent program. Originally, this book launch was set to take place in April of this year at GVJCI, but of course, the pandemic would alter those plans. So we're very glad that this program has been able to transition successfully into an online format. And as a Japanese American nonprofit community center, GVJCI co-sponsors many wonderful educational programs throughout the year for people of all ages, ranging from youth to senior. And so what we have here is a couple of great offerings that we have for this fall. So for youth, we have an online baking workshop where children can learn to make Japanese desserts like dorayaki and mochi donuts. And we also have Oshogatsu, where children can learn about Japanese New Year traditions through storytelling and cooking. And additionally, for young adults, we're also excited to offer a free Komari workshop where people can learn about Marie Kondo's organizational method from a certified professional. And also for seniors, we have an online smartphone class where participants can learn the basics of their iPhone or Android, and hopefully take our other online senior exercise classes. And lastly, we have our fundraising events. So we have a restaurant drive-through fundraiser happening in December. And we also have our annual GVJCI Elemental Funk Concert fundraiser next month on November 21st, which will be live streamed on our website. And of course, all of these programs are all made possible through the kind support and generosity of the community. So whether you'd like to make a monetary donation or volunteer your time at one of our events, we'd like to invite you to our website at the bottom of the screen there to learn more about ways to get involved. So we appreciate your support, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much to all of today's speakers, as well as to Karen, Meg, Barbara, and Tom. This concludes our program, and we hope that you enjoyed it. For all of you who have registered, we will send you the link to buy the book and info on upcoming events. Please be safe, everyone, and we hope to see you again. Keep on rocking the boat, and please rock the vote.
No, sis, what happened to the thing where you could clap? Oh, I don't know.
Oh, we have one more slide to show. CCED.
Okay.
King, are you here?
I'm still here. Thanks for showing the slide. And we just want to bring up one issue that we've been working on. CCED, Chinatown Committee for Equitable Development, works in tenants area against gentrification. One of the things that we want to bring out is that we are defending a commercial tenant on Broadway in Chinatown who is being facing evicted. Actually, there are two other tenants are being evicted, but they got, I think, kind of resolved. And one of the important things is that the landlord, his name is Jackson Yang. His kids all went to UCLA, 3 kids, but he's a big supporter of, I guess, UCLA donate $2 million for Taiwan. So this really tie in with UCLA. I know that quite a few folks here probably attending are from UCLA or connected. So we urge you to support our struggle and help with the fight, and ask Jackson Yang to multimillionaire to give this mom and pop commercial tenant a chance to stay and make a living. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I believe that now does conclude our program, and we are right on time. Excellent. So again, as we said, please purchase your copy of Rockin the Boat. Keep on rocking the boat and vote.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, I want to see more people.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, there's still 90
If anyone wants to chat with Mary and the speakers, if you can, if you want to hang out afterwards, we could stop the recording and then, just like a book lunch, if that's okay with you, Mary.
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to stop the recording. And if people want to just informally hang out and chat with Mary and the speakers, you're very welcome to. We'll just keep the Zoom on.
Guys, hello everybody. Bye.
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 Thank you.
This is a good opportunity. There were quite a lot of questions that we were unable to fit in. They all came in a flurry at the end. So if those people are still around, this is your chance to ask the speakers or talk with them, chat. Yes, we can hear you.
The recording has stopped.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Thanks, Dwayne. Are you still there?
I think he checked out.
Well, there's still 57 people who are still present, so.
Yeah, somebody should say something.
Hi, Yuriko.
I think Yuriko had a question that we didn't get to. I think Yuriko had a question.
There's another Yuriko.
There's one in New York.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I don't know whether it's off the topic or not, but did anybody join the Nisei Progressives? If they did, if you did, could you share something?
I think Vivian said she did.
Yeah, I'm a marginal participant in Nikkei Progressives.
Wow.
And they're very. Are you? Yeah, anybody can join.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, if you would like to. And is there a particular interest that you have?
I don't know much about it, so I just want to know, maybe even in general information.
They hold about a meeting once a month, and even a casual, what they call a sip and share meeting, I think, twice a month. So I think you can get them online.
Oh, how can I get information about the group?
I think if you just type in Nikkei Progressives, it'll come up. No problem.
That's great.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
She had that great question about burnout, and she had many more.
Okay, I'm going to cheat and ask a couple questions, and anybody can ask one or both or everything. So one was if you could share your experiences with like about leadership, like I guess this is more like once you're in the movement and stuff, like how do you deal with like bad leadership if there was any, and what kind of style was like, did you guys prefer or was effective, you found to be effective? And the other question is personal, like for the ones who have kids, like I was just wondering like I'm just sitting here thinking like I wish you guys were my aunt or mom or grandma or something. That would be so badass. So I was just wondering if your kids are also like following your footsteps.
Well, I'll start. No, my children are not following in my footsteps, unfortunately. I think they just grew up in a different time and place, and their interests were different. But I think raising children during that time was really difficult, depending on your family situation and so forth. And that was one of the reasons why I had to cut back so much, because I didn't really have any family to help out. And I think for those of us now that are, our kids are grown and we're grandparenting, we're trying, at least for myself, trying to provide the support that we didn't get. There was a woman in the movement years and years ago, Dorothy Healy, who was a young communist, and she worked in the fields and so forth. But anyways, when Dorothy was a huge activist in the Communist Party, her mother was wobbly, so this was way, way back. And her mother stopped being involved in a lot of political activity so she could take care of Dorothy's son, because Dorothy was out of town. She was a single parent. And then when Dorothy's son moved to D.C., and Dorothy was very active in LA, she had a show on KPFK and so on. Anyways, she moved to D.C. so that she could help out her son, because her son was kind of following in her footsteps. And again, it kind of speaks to the kind of society we live in, where there's no collective response to individual situations. We tried to do some of that a little bit in the movement, with cooperative daycare and things like that. But I think it's still difficult for a working mom to be active. There's a lot of struggles around that, and it's not easy.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's hard. I think we all wanted our kids to follow in our footsteps, and then when it didn't happen, it was just like, wow, they're a bad parent, whatever. I don't beat myself up over it. I'm just happy that they were raised well. I did pull back from being an activist to spend time with my kids, to be at home when they came home from school. So it did put a big dent in how active I was for quite a long period of time. But I always had this thing of, I didn't want them to feel like the movement was taking me away from them, and so they would hate the movement. Because I had seen that happen too, right? Or I've heard of cases like that. But it's like, the best I could say is, they're strong human beings, and so what more can I ask for? And eventually, I think, people are being hit upside the head with everything these days. So which way they turn, I think they may fall back on, some of the things that we talked about when they were growing up. But who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure it sinks in. It's there for them to use when they need to. But that's interesting. You both have concerns with like spending time with family and stuff, and I've noticed, and just on my own observation, like I've seen like very open-minded hippie parents, and then and this is generation 4, and then their kids become like super conservative, and I'm just like, what, how? And now I'm realizing maybe like they might hate the movement if like, and this is a concern for me because I want to have kids, and how to balance that. It sounds really hard.
It's always a juggling act. I don't know if there's any easy answers to it.
Collective babysitting.
Yeah, that would be great, you know.
I don't know. For me, it's a situation was different because I never married and had children. So my struggle throughout life was feeling like a failure that I wasn't getting married and didn't have children. But at long last, I really figured out that I was very lucky that my life is supposed to be longer because I don't have children, and there's different ways, and I am really at peace that my life was meant to be different, and that's okay. And you make your contributions when and where you can, because growing up, I lost two whole groups of friends because they all got married, and I had nothing in common with them. And the same thing for a lot of the movement. Like Mary, a lot of them did withdraw a little bit from their activism, and especially the women, because still in our day, the women were the primary caretakers and were struggling with their husbands to participate. And so it's every individual struggle, but like Sandy says, it is difficult. We have a woman, Yuna Jost, who is in our Progressive Asian Network, and she is a lawyer. She only has a profession, and she's a big-time Bernie supporter, and her husband is too, and they bring their son Thomas to everything. And so even Thomas, at the age of 10, he went to spend time with his grandparents and said, "Grandpa, we have to go and go out and pass out Bernie literature." Wow. So, it depends on the parents and the child, I think. It's because he's kind of grown up under our nest. So I'm always really happy to see him and really happy to spend time with him if he wants to. But he usually is on his phone device. Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm going to remember to stay, check in on my single friends.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to break in and bring Elaine and Marge into the conversation. So they're the people that were Colorado.
Oh, great.
And it's really neat to, have Colorado coming into the fold, because it's like, I didn't know that many people except that one trip, right? Elaine and Marge, would you like to say anything? Okay, Marge, your mic is on. Elaine's mic is still off. Elaine, your mic, unmute your mic. She's talking, but we can't hear her.
Okay.
Is that it?
Is it on now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Marge, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Marge is from Denver. I'm Long Beach born. I wasn't Denver born. I left Long Beach in 1964 to study music at Boulder. And then in 1968, 69, got sidetracked when I met Charlie Cambridge, who was the only Navajo at the University of Colorado Boulder. And I was working part-time in a Madame Butterfly's gift store. It was a Japanese gift store up in up on the hill in Boulder. And he just kind of ran down why, what was going on with politics, student politics, just nationally, globally, tribally, and, why was he the only, American Indian student at the university? And he said he really needed help to bring more American Indians on campus. And so that kind of began my journey. I've kind of sidetracked from the music. I did get my degree there, but at the university in music, but was really sidetracked and really immersed into the student movement and into the Asian community movement, because I knew that it was really important to link Denver and all in the rural cities where Japanese American farmers in the rural areas of Greeley, Hudson, Keensburg, several areas, even in Alamosa, southern Colorado. It was really important to connect, with the people there, and so that's kind of where I got to start with green movement work, and it was really important. I think you brought up about the JATS office. Warren Furutani, Ron Wakabayashi, Victor Shibata were really key in coming into Boulder and Denver, speaking to groups of people, kind of explaining what was going on the West Coast. And they were really helpful in kind of connecting East Coast, West Coast, which I think in terms of the movement, it becomes East Coast, West Coast centric. And so a lot of the information, even historically on the movement, there's pieces missing. And so I'm really, really just grateful to Mary for putting Denver, Boulder, Rocky Mountains on the map, because a lot was going on in the late 60s. That's when the movement began up in Boulder, moved down to Denver and parts of rural areas of Colorado. We heard that there were things going on in Salt Lake. I don't think anything's being written about Salt Lake in terms of activities there, and in other areas too. Nebraska, even historically, even with during the internment camp times, there seems to be big pieces of historical information missing, and so I would hope that there would be researchers and folks, who would bring forth that information. So that would be really great. But thank you so much, Mary, for helping to put Denver and Boulder on the map, for the movement. It's the first time.
I know, and William Way is in Colorado. He wrote the first book. The Asian American movement.
But yeah,
I like to remind people of that.
Yeah, I'll have to get help from Marge, because Marge is Denver born. Marge, are you there? And she continues to do really good work in Denver. Marge, are you there?
I am. I was born in Los Angeles, and I spent the first 4 years of my life at Manzanar. And my family had to, quote unquote, relocate to Colorado because of my mother's situation. She was born in San Francisco, but raised in Yokohama, and the U.S. government wouldn't let us go back to L.A., which is where we left for Manzanar from, because of my mother's situation. They said she had the so-called rights of a U.S. citizen, but because she was raised in Japan, she might be loyal to Japan, so we had to move inland and away from the West Coast. So that's how come I ended up here and worked on the pilgrimages to Amachi, of course, based on the work of the Manzanar Committee. My younger sister, Mariko Yamada, was with the Manzanar Committee at its early stages. And our mother, Kimiko Yamada, also went out to those early pilgrimages. My older sister, Irene Hadeshi, who lives in Gardena, actually went on that very first pilgrimage in '69 in the cold. Our father had just died, and she went to Manzanar to honor him. He was a fireman there. I did see Jane Cano on there you are, Jane, and she was, of course, one of our CARP members. And I think Dean Tsutsui might have been on the call. I don't know if he's still on or not, but we had a really wonderful group of Pan-Asian people who worked together on many different projects, a hot lunch program for the elderly, a children's cultural workshop, a food distribution program, and some of us were involved in the organizing the first formal pilgrimage to Amachi. And at that time, the original barbed wire was still up, and the cemetery was still surrounded by the original barbed wire. And if changed quite a bit now. I know that's not good for historical preservation, but we're working towards getting a national park status for Amachi. And we know that Manzanar had a difficult time when they transferred over to the Park Service. The guard stations at the entrance to Manzanar, my father helped to build those. He went out with the rock crews out onto the desert to gather the rocks to build those structures. And he was always proud of the fact that they used all natural stone. He told me that for the windows, they wouldn't chip any of the rocks to make them fit. They were all natural, and he would choose the slanted rocks so that the rain and snow would fall outside of the stone guard houses rather than inside. And when the Park Service took over, they sealed up those guard stations, and so you can't see the names of those who constructed them that are written into on the inside of those guard stations. So Jane, I don't know if you want to say a few words about your time with CARP and with all.
And Jane, by the way, Jane was a high school student during that time. I think you're in probably the 10th grade. I think we saw you grow up and graduate high school. Jane, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, yeah. Did you want to?
It was very influential.
Oh, there you are. How you doing? Haven't seen you since last September.
I went on to get a medical degree and practiced in solo practice here in Denver. So at that time, about 20%, 25% of my practice was Japanese American and pretty diverse patient population. But when I retired a couple of years ago, one of my things on my list of possible things to do was activism, but I don't think my bladder's built for marching anymore. And so this has been really interesting. I enjoyed this, and I think documenting the history is really important. And I'm kind of thinking, after hearing some of the discussion, that maybe I can help raise activist grandchildren. I know they've already gotten some books like Anti-Racist Baby.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the books that my granddaughter has, and so I guess I can have some peripheral influence as the grandma. So thank you very much for this talk.
I see my sister Mariko on the line there. She's in the Davis area and left Denver after graduating from U Boulder. Do you want to say a few words?
Hi. Actually, I had logged off, and Midori, both Midori and Meili, our daughters, are on the call as well. So they just texted us and said, did you know your sister was speaking? But anyway, thank you very much for this really excellent presentation. Sorry I left. I thought you guys were done. But as I put in a chat before the end of the program, the formal program, I just wanted to thank Mary for including those photos of our mother that I did not know existed. And so we just ordered the book, by the way. So we look forward to seeing it. And just fascinating to see part of my own journey when I moved from Colorado, from Boulder to Los Angeles to attend a social work grad program, and remember going to the JAC's office and honestly being confronted with the reality that many students were viewed as, ripping the community off and not really having the commitment to the movement. And I actually ended up going to work for Special Service for Groups, which was George Nishinaka, one of our famous or infamous social workers as well. And so that's how I kind of continued my pathway to serving the community. But it's really great to see everyone together, especially during these rather extraordinary times. And I'm glad, my sister is, she's the linchpin in Denver still, so she's still rabble-rousing after all these years as well. So thank you again, and I'm sorry, I'll have to get the recording to hear what you said.
I've seen you, Mariko. I haven't seen you in years.
I know.
Mariko was one of our first Asian American EOP students in 1970 at University of Colorado Boulder. So there were a lot of students who graduated that returned to the community or continued working in the community while they were undergrads. And spending a lot of time in meetings in Denver.
Yeah, Elaine, you probably recruited about, 90%.
That's right. Well, and getting to see Elaine now after all these years as well.
I know, it's been many years.
Yeah, thank you for keeping all the AAEOP folks connected after all these decades. And I did want to give a shout out really to AAEOP in Boulder, because it was the first Asian American mental health conference that we were invited, that someone was invited to. I think it was Ken Tagawa, and you received the invitation. And for whatever reason under the cosmos, I think the two of you decided to ask if I could attend, since I was the mental health track person at the time. Yeah. And so I thought, well, why not? And we were only apportioned one delegate for the state of Colorado. This was based on Asian American population. I guess it was 1972. And so I went, and that's when I, encountered all of these radical Asian American social workers in San Francisco, but they were from the LA area. And that's really how I ended up on the track to pursue my master's in social work, and sort of the rest is history. But it's something that, was very serendipitous at the time, but certainly, that was the foundation upon which I was able to hopefully make a little dent in some of the injustice that, all communities continue to face to this day. So, thank you for that break.
Oh, you're welcome. We knew you were going to make some great strides on helping the community out, and thank you very much for your work in the democratic process as an assemblywoman in Northern California.
Thank you. I never thought I would do that either, but now we just have Al Muratsuchi in the state legislature as a Japanese American. But there are many AAPIs, or really Asians, not very many Pacific Islanders yet represented in the legislature. Yes. But we know the struggle continues from Cato, on. I mean, we're back in that fight again, So anyway, but first things first, November 3rd.
Yes, most definitely.
Yes.
Good seeing you, Michael.
Good to see you.
Hi, David.
Wow, thanks a lot for letting us connect. I haven't seen Mariko in many, many years.
The hair is a lot shorter.
Oh, yeah. We'll have another gathering in Boulder in 2 years for the EOP reunion.
I'm Mary.
Yeah.
Hi, David. Hi, how are you?
Hi. I'm good. I'm just asking. The movement. 50 years ago. It's commendable, and I'm sure. It just continue to progress. I'm sure it's expanding, but you have different group or whatever. Well, it would be if they a little bit unify. That would be a much stronger force. instead of in a different group. I don't know. Can you hear that?
I agree with you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
But you're freezing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess your connection's bad.
Oh, I don't know what I did. Yeah. Well,
Sorry to change
okay.
this up.
I don't know. I just unmuted.
Okay. Do we want to?
It's your party, Mary. We'll do it if you like.
Well, I think we've been on long enough. I don't know if Valerie or Malcolm or John want to show their faces and say hello.
I'd like to see their faces.
Hey guys, are you still there? Oh, there's John. Valerie. There's Valerie. Malcolm was having trouble with his laptop. I guess he never solved it. Anyways, okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mary, Valerie.
Thank you, Mary.
Oh,
Well, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Mary. Well deserved. Well deserved.
I need to order more books, Mary. I'll email you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara and Tom.
Yes. Valerie, thank you.
You did a great job moderating.
Well,
yes, you did, Valerie. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry about when we didn't see the CCED slide immediately come up. I thought, oh, is it coming? So I just went ahead, but sorry about that. I
cut in on that.
It was fine. Yeah, thanks to Tom and Barbara, Meg, and everyone for helping on the organizing and technical side.
Thanks again. And
yeah.
Have a good rest
congratulations.
Bye.
Congratulations once
Thanks
again, Mary.
Great work.
Okay. See you all.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Bye,
Mary.
Mary.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Don't forget to save the chat if you want any of the chat.
Oh, how do we do that?
Okay, so at the bottom of the chat, there's a little box that has 3 dots in it.
Uh-huh.
And if you click on that, you'll say Save Chat. And then you click on Save Chat. And then it'll say Chat Saved. And then you can find it. It'll be on your desktop somewhere. Or in a folder. Hi, John. John Kao, hi.
Hello, Vivian.
And thank you to John Gal for doing the cooking so I can do this work.
Okay. Very good.
All right. Okay, chicken out.
All right, me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to all. Thank you all.
Hi, Kenwood.
Thank you.
Keep on moving. Keep on moving forward. Know what the truth is. I tell you something. I tell you something you can do. Say keep on moving. Say keep on moving for what's true. Yeah, 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 yeah. Very much. Must be something we can do.